what you're saying would be the worst thing that could possibly happen to this person because they're so rigid.
Yeah.
And they're constantly looking for validation in their rigidity because they're quote unquote
healthy.
Yes. But are you looking to break free from abusive body image issues or body dysmorphia? Well, if you are, welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, it's an op-ed on one of our favorite podcasts, Mind Pump's recent episode on body image and body dysmorphia, adding to it our clinical perspective and psychological view of body image, body dysmorphia, and what we would suggest for clients who are really struggling in this area. So if you're ready, listen up and lean in as we elevate your mind. Mm-hmm. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to those. If you're new to this podcast, please make sure, if you haven't already, hit that follow and subscribe button. And if you like this podcast, please share it with others because a lot of the people listening to this are most likely new to our podcast as we are doing an opt-ed or additional PS from our boys at Mind Pump on their recent episode 2560 on how to avoid and break free from abusive body image issues. So the reason we wanted to talk about this is because we are huge fans of Mind Pump and we really loved that they, shined a light on the issues around body image and body dysmorphia, even touching on how that affects the fitness world, which we just had an episode with Michelle Carroll, PhD candidate in this area. And we want to add to it from our lens.
Yeah.
Because, Mind Pump, they're very educated, very skilled, but they've talked about it. They're not therapists. And, they kind of gave really good information on how to handle this from a maybe coach's perspective or even the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we listened to it and we thought it was brilliant. And we want to add what we might change or do differently, especially for that person who's really in it in the moment, because we've both had our experiences with that. And I think when we were listening to it, we were thinking from the lens of, would I have, consumed this and understood it and maybe even validated the information if I was in my shit?
Yeah. So that's why I had messaged you about it, because I was like, man, I appreciate that they released that kind of episode. And I thought it was very ironic because we had just released Michelle's episode too, with the stats and statistics. But then when I was listening to it, I almost found myself a little bit like frustrated because I was listening to it, but I was hearing like my past self with it and thinking like, I don't think I would have bought into these simple things that they're saying. And it came from a very baseline place of like, start here, try this, if this is you, which I did appreciate. But I think if I was in who I was about, we'll say 7-ish years ago for a blanket statement, I don't think I would have bought in as I do now.
Right.
I think the person that listened to that had to have more of an open mind. And I'm not sure people recognize that what they're doing is disordered behavior until it starts to really impact them. Whereas, and maybe that's who they were gravitating towards. But even then, I think that person still tries to control more. And then something happens for them to realize this is not working.
Well, two things there. Number one, when in their particular audience, they're hoping that those people are also listening to all of the surrounding episodes. So then this particular episode would hopefully be, and I'm speaking for them, would be like in addition to the information we've already given, because they give such wonderful information, whether it be, people calling in and them having those deep discussions, because they do, like they really go into the layers rather than just, do less, right? Yeah.
You'll be fine.
Right. And so I think that, when we look at it just from the lens of like the person who's really struggling, maybe they're not a person who follows them, but I just want to validate that side of it. But you're right. The number one reason people go to seek help is because their thing they're doing is affecting a relationship, whether it's relationship with their family, their spouse, their friends, they're losing people in their lives. Usually this thing happens where they say, wow, this is affecting me. I can't go out to dinner with my spouse and not freak out because there's butter on my steak. Right. Or
she's using that example because that's me. That was me.
Right. Or I get injured and now I'm freaking the fuck out because I can't
move.
right?
Yeah.
And so that is relational, that is something that I want to validate does bring people in. And so I want to just provide some understanding. So the first thing I heard when I was listening to that was the word body dysmorphia. And I don't want people to get body image struggles and body dysmorphia confused.
What's the difference?
So body dysmorphia is actually in the DSM-5.
Okay.
It's a diagnosis. It's a disorder. And we want to think about it as an extreme version of how we see ourselves. So there's this preoccupation with one or two quote unquote flaws that we see in our bodies, but to the naked eye or to someone else, it doesn't appear that that flaw is true. And there's this hyperfixation on changing that flaw. And what happens, and we've talked about this with eating disorders, is that this hyperfixation or dislike in our bodies ends up the thoughts, the feelings, the behaviors around it begin to affect other areas of our life. So again, relationships, maybe our careers, our families, obviously our self-esteem. Whereas body image, and Sal had said it could be, I wear the high heels even though they hurt my feet because they make my legs look longer. I have done that many times. So there's a lot of, differences in between, but I wanted to talk about that. And I wanted to talk about kind of the fitness industry and like how it affects them. So in the general population, about 1.7 to 2.9% of individuals struggle with body dysmorphia.
Do you think it's probably more?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm talking about body dysmorphia.
Like diagnosed as. Okay.
So that's about 5 million people in the US, whereas, and that was in 2021. In a 2019 study, among regular exercisers, almost 40% of people struggled with BDD, females being 47.2% of those people. However, muscle dysmorphia affects about 3.6 to 30% of male weightlifters based on research from 2000 to 2018. So we're starting to see these new developments around these different types of body dysmorphia and eating disorders, right? So you have orthorexia, which I think was the first one to be like, oh, yeah, this hyperfixation on eating clean, working out every day and just being very rigid in how your relationship with your body and food is. That became orthorexia. Now, orthorexia first started, which it was more around the clean eating. Like I don't put any, seed oils in my bodies and this, that, the other thing. But we've also seen bigorexia. So bigorexia is this hyperfixation on how big you are and muscular and other things like that. So I wanted to give some statistics on that because they had mentioned, that it is very prevalent specifically in the fitness community. What causes something like body dysmorphia, body dysmorphic disorder, or, obsession around the body is a variety of things that we talk about on this podcast. And I think that this part was left out. Kind of, well, why, right? It's there.
Yeah.
And we're trying to change the behaviors. But if you don't understand why it's there, that your beliefs about yourself are still going to be present. So there's a lot of environmental, psychological, and biological factors that affect this. So obviously your upbringing and your childhood, if we just look at society in general, if you look a certain way, you are seen as good. And my example is my example is always the Hydroxycut commercial where you have the before where she's like sad and like her body is like, she's in a bigger body. And then the after is her running and frolicking on the beach with her hot ass boyfriend. Yeah. And it's like, this could be you too. So from a social perspective, there's that, but also, if I see that, and I also have a childhood upbringing of you're only as good as how others perceive you. So that can look like a parent who puts a lot of emphasis on achievement, a parent who puts a lot of emphasis on like looking a certain way. I always use the example of like you and your family just got a huge fight before church, but then you put your church best on, put your smiles on and walk into church and pretend like everything's okay. You're not really focusing on the human part of that. You're just saying We don't care about these feelings or what just happened or conflict resolution. Just look good. And so many other things. Like for me, it was dance, right? That if I performed well, I was praised, but also I had to have a certain body type in an effort to perform well, or at least that was a message that I received. And there was a lot of stigma if you were in a larger body. Honestly, I was thinking about it the other day. I don't remember any of my friends who are in larger bodies getting the achievements that I did. They weren't seen as good in the dance world.
That's so sad.
And if you're a dancer, I want to know your stories on that. Other things that this causes is obviously low self-esteem, body shame, right? So if I'm not looking a certain way, or that one area of my body is still, puffy.
Yeah.
I'm going to hyper fixate on it. Whereas I might be, so healthy and strong and limber, but if my,
lower belly,
yeah,
always there.
If that's not good, then I'm not good, which goes into that perfectionism that my body has to look like the girl in the Hydroxycut commercial, which we'll talk about. But that girl has probably her own, as we're seeing, body image struggles. And for her, she has become obsessive in changing her body, dieting, exercise, and so on.
Well, not only that, but upholding that too.
Oh, yeah.
And not understanding that the body just fluctuates in general, right? So always trying to achieve like more of what she perceives.
Right. Well, and when was the first time you realized like people in before and after, or like fitness magazines, commercials were fitness models? Like that was their job. Because I was just like, wow, look at her. She looks so great. Like there was not this connection.
I don't think I ever knew that. I think
their job.
Yeah, I think it was probably within the last couple of years that I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Hang on here.
Right.
Like I see a lot of before and afters from our clients, but they like, it's totally different than this like 3-month before and after of what they show.
Right. Well, and I don't remember what I was watching. It was a reality show. I don't remember the channel it was on, but it was on this, I think it was an Equinox. And
the gym Equinox?
Yeah.
Okay.
And like how it was in New York City. And a lot of them were fitness models, and like showing their lifestyle and what they went through. And I think there was also a True Life on MTV, like a bodybuilder one.
Man, I forgot about that show.
Listen,
that was a good show.
There's a lot of stuff that came out of the 2000s. Just to finish it off, genetic predisposition. Now, I want to make this very clear. Just because your family has body image issues doesn't mean you will. The environment more is going to create that than the genetic predisposition. The genes are the bullet. The environment is the gun, for lack of a better example. So when we're seeing mom or dad pick, poke, prod, always on a diet, saying the things they're saying, avoiding situations that bodies are exposed, like being in the pool, we're going to see that. We're going to learn that. And we're going to think, because that's the person who's supposed to teach us about
self-respect,
our worth, right? That, well, the person I think is absolutely amazing and wonderful and perfect is telling me that they're not, because the way their body looks. Well, then I am a part of them. So what does that mean about myself? And then, of course, co-occurring diagnoses like anxiety, depression, and OCD can exacerbate symptoms of body dysmorphia and body image.
Oh, yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah. So the other things I want to talk about that they had mentioned is orthorexia, which I just touched on. So an unhealthy obsession with eating clean, pure, or healthy, often masked as discipline. Orthorexia, as of 2023, affects about 55.3 people that exercise regularly. Over half.
Yeah.
Over half.
Well, that's
people
who admitted it too.
Yeah. Right.
Because you could poll and be like, no, like,
I'm fine.
I'm fine. But whether they are being honest or they don't know.
They don't have the awareness.
Yeah.
One other thing is in 2021, they found that orthorexia in 81% of high frequency exercises. So people who are doing it more than, I'm guessing, 4 or 5 times a week. So, in the community, this fitness and eating clean obviously is praised. And a part of nourishing your body with foods that your body actually needs, and exercising is obviously so healthy. we wouldn't have this podcast otherwise. But there's a line between this kind of discipline, and I don't even like that word, but just balanced life, right? And dysfunction. And a lot of people in this industry, that line gets very blurred, very, very blurred. And we'll touch on that.
It gets blurred in their own opinion, but also other people outside of their life blur in addition to, because they use their statements or their positive reinforcement as reason to continue.
Right.
I would think.
Well, and one of the things, and why we wanted to have this op-ed is when your body is your business card, right? It becomes your identity. It is your identity. And we don't just take a week off of our identity. There's so much more work that has to happen with that. And that's why we want to, for that, this podcast is really for that person who was like, oh, no, I'm fucking deep. I can't take the week off. So what else could I do?
Yeah.
And so we're going to add that layer.
Well, and even they're deep where they take the week off, quote unquote, but the week off is going to core power yoga or going to like a spin class or going hiking every day or something that is not a week off. Like a week off looks like either really lightly or really kind of decreasing the weight and going lighter with the movements,
right?
Practicing mobility, going for walks, but not like strenuous walks, like a walk around the block is what we're talking about. But when they say take the week off, I think going back to myself, I would have justified the week off by going to spin like twice that week and then maybe some Pilates and like a core power class.
Right.
And that would have been a week off I did just in something else.
Right.
Instead of really saying like, no, my body needs like mobility and rest and maybe just some extra time in bed. Right. And I found that when they were like, just take the week off, in addition to that, even if I did, I probably would have spiraled because I wouldn't have anything to do.
Right.
So I would be like, well, I might as well, because I'm just not doing anything instead of finding other ways to bring value into my life, because fitness was the only way I brought value into my life.
And you make a good point of what we call like creating that foundation before we're going to make these like big changes, because if I don't know what to do with my time, I mean, the amount of anxiety, stress, I mean,
additional time to body pick.
Absolutely.
Because I would have done that too.
Right.
And I did do that.
I mean, even now, and y'all know we both struggled with our own body image issues, and they still continue, but I'm very thankful that they're so much, they've decreased significantly.
Or I have tools to recognize when they're happening.
Yeah.
Like, especially for postpartum, literally last week was really hard for me mentally, like in my body, but I have tools now that I don't let that control what happens with my actions.
Yeah. No, it's funny because yesterday I was just having a day, same shit, different day about business and that y'all know. And I found myself like, oh, and your body. And I was like, no, bitch. Yes, excuse you, ma'am. You ain't talking. We're not adding that into this mix. Yeah. So this is the one that, the first one that they had suggested is take the week off. So as we're already explaining that for our clients that come in with body image, body dysmorphia struggles, that's actually something we're not going to do. We're going to titrate them down from their behaviors.
Yes.
Right. And so
I think your client Michael's a perfect example of this.
Right. Exactly. And actually he was on their show too. What I don't want to happen is that exactly what we're talking about, that we're creating a scenario for like failure, a mental breakdown, that sounds dramatic, but I don't want to put someone in a position to sit with themselves when they haven't done that for so long that they're worse off than if we can maybe take a month or two to kind of slowly titrate them down from the excessive exercise, kind of helping them eat in a better way. And I'll tell you guys from my experience, it's not my clients, they're eating enough, right, to not like be in that anorexic place, because I personally would then refer them to dietitian, something like that. But the way that they're eating is so rigid and the types of food they're eating is so rigid that it's just slowly nicking away at that. Like, okay, this week, let's try not to eat 250 grams of protein because you just told me you're having digestive issues. So maybe, and also that, and he knows who I'm talking about. That protein you're eating 70% at night, and then you're not sleeping, your digestion is off. Like, and you'll start seeing these behaviors of like, I don't eat during the day, or I eat very small, I don't eat lunch, and then I binge at dinner, but it's all binging on like healthy foods, right? Because that's just a rigid mindset.
You're talking about they would do this in spite of not working out or taking the week off?
Oh no, that's on top of. Yeah. So this is just an example, guys. And so slowly nicking away at these behaviors. So maybe we, try to have more protein at breakfast and, and I'm giving this example. This is a personal example from a client, but let's talk to the average person. So rather than, I saw this on Instagram yesterday, this girl's like, me eating the same breakfast I have for 3 years. And it's like her like smiling and laughing. And I was like, that's so disordered. Why would you eat the same breakfast for 3 years? Every day. It said every day for 3 years. And I'm like, why?
You never gone on vacation in 3 years?
Right. It's like, is that your safe food? Right. Yeah. So now maybe we say, okay, I'm not going to change the breakfast. I'm going to say, instead of blueberries, we're going to have banana today. Right. So that's just one example. Just thinking about where you're at. These are my rigid rules around food in an effort to make my body look a certain way. It could be I eat the same things at the same time. I avoid certain foods. I have to save my calories at the end of the day. That's what I've seen a lot with men. It's very interesting. Now, we're teetering into eating disorder, but I want everyone to know that these things all love to hang out together in the sandbox, right? They are besties. So rather than having someone take a week away from this, we need to kind of slowly let the air out of the balloon, rather than when I think of saying, okay, well, you're going to take this next week off of exercise and tracking food and that's like me just letting the balloon go.
Yeah. I can think about like from a practical standpoint of myself, if you would say I was working with you or coaching with you or somebody and they said, let's just take the week off. I don't want you tracking and I don't want you exercising. What honestly would have happened is, one, like I said, I would have tried to manipulate what I thought was rest exercise, or two, I would have not, but then I would have been anxious so today's Monday, for example, I would have been chopping at the bits for like Saturday, and I would have made Saturday and the following week really hard exercise to make up for not doing it this week.
Right.
Then in addition to that, if they said like, don't track, I would have said, okay, fine. But then I would have tried to slim down the calories because in my mind, and I see this a lot of, if I'm not working out, then I don't earn these calories, which again, if you've listened to Mind Pump for quite some time, and if you listen to us for quite some time, then calories in doesn't necessarily equate to calories out. But in that disordered mindset, there's a lot of earning who you are, proving who you are. And those are the two ways to gravitate of controlling that.
Right. Exactly. No, it's true. And so now they talked about it on a spectrum.
Yes.
So for the person who is like, maybe they're just getting into their health journey and they're starting to see results.
This isn't really
there's them. No. And they're starting to like get hyper fixated on like the results. Then yes, their advice is beautiful to avoid this. Adding in weeks where we're not tracking, adding in weeks where we're taking a rest day, making sure that we're being cognizant when we're standing in front of the mirror, all of those things.
Yeah.
That's beautiful for you if you are starting into this journey and it hasn't gone so far to the extreme, which is who we oftentimes deal with. So that for someone new, wonderful.
Yeah.
Take that week off. It's a mental rest. It's a non-body week. And we're going to work inward and do some meditation and prayer, as Sal mentioned, journaling, reading, whatever that looks like.
That's what I wanted to bring up earlier was the journaling aspect when they had recommended doing that. And I So I'm a big fan of talking out loud, whether that's to yourself or someone that's trusted,
Mm-hmm.
but getting it out. The thing that I, again, had a different perspective of is there's no kind of guide of how to get these thoughts out. So, like, for example, why is it uncomfortable for me to take that week off?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do I tell myself? What does that mean? Where does it come from? Essentially, the whole method.
Right.
So the method is our curriculum that we work with for our coaching program, essentially going through that. And it's not to say that they'll go through it within the week, it's a 16-week program and then some.
Right.
But at this time to take the week off and to recommend like journal, prayer, yes. But where's the guidance of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, you bring up a good point of why don't we start there? Why don't we start journaling just about the thoughts around
and
taking that week off?
Yes.
Right.
Because the thought is going to be more like just even the thought.
Right.
I can picture myself like cringing, like shaking the chair, like, okay, I'll do it. You know?
Well, and then you're prepared for when that happens, when you do eventually get to the place.
The futurisms, like predicting what can happen.
I'm saying,
okay, here's my plan.
Based on what you've told me and what you've sat with over this course of a week or two of journaling this, like throughout your day, like what would this look like if I wasn't doing this? What feelings might come up? What thoughts would I have about myself? What fears would I have? Then when we actually do it, I can say, remember, this and this is going to happen. We know that. And because of what I'm going to talk about next, this is what we're going to do instead. Yeah. And that is, yes, having practices like journaling is going to be helpful, but we need to have a plethora or a toolbox, as we say, of practices so that we can say, okay, when we're, and this is my favorite thing to tell clients, when we're getting caught in the mirror, my favorite thing to say to them is, we're not doing this today.
And you mean caught in the mirror of just like staring,
picking apart. We're not doing this today. Or I'll have them say,
I say, this isn't helpful.
That's exactly like, I know this isn't helping me. So I'm just going to walk away. And, that's just one very small example of what to do. When the fear rises, allow it to come. This is a fear that we've been avoiding through the behavior. So we're going to teach them how to ride the wave of that emotion, right? Emotions are transient. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They usually, when we allow them to naturally work through our body, last about 90 seconds.
Yeah. So that's another thing I like to tell clients too, is like, feel this emotion, because the more you suppress and push it down, it actually lasts longer rather than you just sitting in it. And it's very scary because you don't know what's going to happen. But again, it's probably a shorter amount of time than you constantly shoving it down your throat. And it's going to come out some way or another, whether that's over exercising, binge eating, refraining from food, refraining from social activities, like however you manage to cope with that feeling that you're trying to avoid.
Right. So interestingly, like I align a lot with Adam, like oftentimes even the episodes where I've been involved with him in some capacity or them in some capacity, he's usually the one I lean towards because he does have more of this like titrate.
Cerebral.
Yeah. Titrate down. Like we're not making extreme jumps. So he had mentioned that oftentimes this is a secondary addiction and what I call addiction hopping. Like maybe before it was drugs, alcohol, gambling, and now it's exercise because socially it's more acceptable. What you just said reminds me of like, you would then just create a new addiction if we're not sitting through the emotions. It could be social media. It could be shopping, right? Something that again is buying a little more socially acceptable. And yeah, you're buying time because you don't have the skills to go through that separation from these behaviors. So what we would add to what they're saying is prior to taking the week off, we want to just imagine what that's going to be like. What might come up for you? Again, thoughts, feelings, emotions. What might you feel when you're sitting through discomfort? What might you try to turn to instead? Really examining what that might look like. Now, the brain doesn't know if it's happened or it hasn't happened. So at least just sitting through it, the brain says, oh, I have a little bit of experience with that, right? Because you've imagined that it's happening. We've felt the emotions. We had the thoughts. We even imagined ourselves doing behavior X, Y, Z. Maybe that behavior doesn't happen. But again, as a coach, I can say, remember, these things are most likely to happen. Then again, starting to teach some skills. So we're going to journal in that moment. We're going to sit through the emotion. And afterwards, once that emotion ends, we're not going to hold on to it. We're not going to push it away. We're going to go do something nice for ourselves. What does nice for ourselves look like to you? And
that is an exercise.
That is an exercise. Exactly.
Yeah.
And they may not know. So maybe prior to the week off, we start side by side
ideas
of
what can that be.
Right. And then in that week, right, as a coach, we're reminding them, remember, we're expecting this to happen, and it is okay. And remember the skills we have. And we're not coaches that we're not the authority. The client is always the authority. And well, shouldn't say always, if we're dealing with like when they're connected to themselves, they're the authority. When they're connected to the external validation, we have to come in and be like, no.
Yeah.
So just to make sure people understand that. Yeah. We're going to walk and hold their hands side by side through that process rather than like, don't forget that you need to do your journaling. I'll say something like, okay, let's go back to that moment. What might have been something you could have done to make you feel a little less anxious or a little less, the things that we talked about before. Maybe let's remember that in the future. Do you want me to put this in your tasks for you? We have an app, so we can put it as a task and we'll remind them, and we could do it 3 times a day, 5 times a day to remind them, like, check in with my body, right? Or let's meditate or go play with the dogs, right? Whatever we decided, we can support them in that. But also we want to help them come up with the answers. We're going to teach them at first, but then in those moments when they're on that week off and maybe they did struggle, we're going to treat it with compassion and empathy. We're going to say, great, you're aware of it this time though. And also let's look at how we can approach it next time, because it will happen again. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking too. If like, I always like to tell clients in this stage of like, we're going to practice because again, it's going to happen again, but we need better kind of planning or better forecasting for vacations, celebrations, unexpected events. Like those things are going to happen. A birthday happens every year, right? So what are we going to do? Like maybe the birthday is your kid's birthday and you don't have time to go to the gym that day because you're so excited for them.
Right.
But so what do? And that's going to happen every year.
Right. Well, and it makes me think of someone who is associated with both parties here, us and them, that I've had discussions with, that what you're saying would be the worst thing that could possibly happen to this person, because they're so rigid and they're constantly looking for validation in their rigidity because they're quote unquote
healthy.
Yes. But we haven't checked out this person's heart, right? I don't know what their muscle mass is, right? So the things that actually promote longevity, while the body fat percentage might be low and they say they're energetic and this and that, like I don't have and I said that to them, I don't have this data, like, and I can't work with you because I don't agree with where we're at. I'm not discounting that maybe you feel like you're thriving on this calorie range and this rigidity and all of this, but to me, that's your, in this case, disorder talking, right? Those normal everyday things like you're talking about are just, it's not even an option, right? And in that case, if that's you and you're listening, then the things we're even saying are probably not enough.
Yeah.
That's where I would recommend a higher level of care, because if that person is so unaware and is validating the behavior, then we're dealing with a bigger beast. But we digress. Next one was making it real and talking to others. Absolutely love this. We want to have those conversations. We want to say, I'm struggling with this thing. Can you support me through it? However, we want to make sure that we're speaking with someone who is, and they said this too, trusting and safe. But we have one thing I want to add to that.
I would say be careful who you're speaking with, because I would say someone that's further in the journey that can reflect back and can understand. So for example, we are that to each other. We are that to clients. Right. And I say that because I could have easily said, oh, I'm really struggling right now. And like, I just feel like, I can't go out to eat without being so concerned about it. Or I have to work out every day, but my body like really hurts, if I was aware of these things, first of all. But second to that, depending on who I'm reaching out to, if that person's in the same environment and the same kind of mindset, they might think like, that's just what we do.
Right.
You know, like if you're married to a bodybuilder and it's normal for them to bring their Tupperware everywhere and you're like, man, I'm really tired of bringing my Tupperware everywhere. And you tell them that and they're in their disordered state going, yeah, but we have to do that in order to like do this.
Right.
Then that's going to, oh, you're right.
That's just what we do.
That's just what we do.
Mhm.
Instead of kind of being like, yeah, but do we have to do this or are we choosing to do this? And even if our choice to do this, is it aligning with what we want out of life?
Right. And how much is it affecting like our emotional health, our mental health?
And then on the flip side of that is someone relating to somebody like maybe a friendship I could see or a significant other, and you're telling them that you're struggling. Yeah, but you're just so healthy. That's just like, it's just part of being the healthy. Like you just, you do it so well and so many people want. And so then that reinforces like, okay, well now I have to uphold this standard that everybody sees me as too.
Which we both struggled with. It becomes again, like a reinforcement to continue. One of the things that people used to joke about when I would tell them that I was an eating disorder therapist, they'd be like, I wish I could get an eating disorder.
What?
Because they wanted to lose weight.
Oh God.
Just for a couple weeks, you know? And I know it's all jokey, but like, for someone who's reaching out for help and they may get that in return, that can be validating, minimizing, almost even, it's very hurtful when you're asking like, I need help with this. And for a lot of people, they won't understand. So everything that the guy said, absolutely true. Reach out for help. Find that safe person. Find the person who's not going to validate the behavior. Like you're so healthy. And if you can find people or community that understands because they've been there and there's going to be someone in that community who's a little bit more ahead who's like, hey,
I get it. And
this is, again, my experience was this happened to me. Not saying it's going to happen to you, but like these are the next steps. It's going to get maybe worse, then it gets better, whatever. Finding that person who understands is so incredibly important because I can look at my friends and say, I talked about these things and it was only a few people who are like, this is an issue, right? Like, what's the end result here?
I don't even think I talked to anybody about it because I think it was such like it wasn't shameful, but I feel like it was like, I wouldn't have labeled it a shame, but it felt very shameful. And I remember because my parents wrote me a letter and being like, we're concerned. And I remember thinking, they don't understand. I can't go to them.
Right.
Like I can't trust them to get what I'm trying to do here. And mind you, I wasn't trying to like be a bodybuilder, be a powerlifter. Like it was just like, I thoroughly thought I enjoyed working out, 3 hours every day and eating the way I did. And so you have to be careful, right? Because my parents are one of my most trusted people in my life. But at that time, I was like, nope, okay, you don't get it. We're out. When they're trying to reach out a hand going, we see something that's going on that isn't well, right? You're not mentally well doing this.
Yeah, I've shared my story. My friend Caitlin just said, and she and I are friends. She's not one of the people that I'm still vulnerable with her, but you have like levels of vulnerability. And she just goes, what's the end result?
Yeah.
What is the end result here?
Yeah.
And I was like,
I don't know.
No one's ever asked me that.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Just to be lean forever.
Yeah. And I was like, but I don't want to, in my brain, I'm like, I don't want to do this forever. Like, this isn't fun.
Well, because it becomes, I think, sidebar for this, I think it becomes like almost like a task and a job rather than an enjoyment.
Oh, yeah.
Like right now I see it as an enjoyment, time for myself, time to hang out with the baby in the garage. Whereas before it was, I got to do it. And there was like, whether I felt good, I felt bad, I was sick, happy, ill, excited, in a good place, at a bad place. Like it's just what you do.
Right.
There is no ifs, ands, buts.
Yeah. So we love everything about, discussing it. Shame lives in darkness. When we can talk about it and people create space for us, that lets go of shame, because the definition of shame is I am bad. But if someone creates that space for you, understanding, compassion, empathy, all of the things, that literally in that moment gets rid of the shame. Because if you're bad, you as a person are bad, then why would this person create that space for you? Right. So I love that. Just caveat is someone who understands. Right.
Well, and caveat to that is utilize them, but also recognize their role. Like if they're not your coach, maybe we need to invest in coaching at that point.
Correct. I was just thinking about, I used to run eating disorder groups, and this was when it fucking flowed. And these are teenagers that I'm working with at the time, because I've worked in adult IOP and an adolescent IOP. And
what is IOP?
Intensive outpatient.
Okay.
So they have gone from inpatient and they're stepped down, or we're starting to see some behaviors where like, we're going to
pump the brakes.
Yeah,
before
we need to have therapy more times per week, basically is what it is. And in my teen groups, more than anything, because they're younger and they have less behavior that we have to unravel, right? Whereas my
still moldable
72-year-old lady, it's a little bit harder. It flowed so well when you had those few girls who would be like, I totally understand, validating, but also being like almost calling out too, but not in a negative way. Just like, I think maybe that's your eating disorder talking, because that's how I would talk, and I'd validate it in my head. And they would just like, and then this, and then this. And then the person's like, that's exactly what's happening right now. It was brilliant. I miss my girls. To this day, there's still girls from my group who like message and they're doing so well. And it's those few who were like, no, I'm going to fight this. I'm not coming back to this. And I'm also going to help use my story to help other people. So just want to throw that in there. Number 3, stop weighing yourself and studying yourself in the mirror.
Yes.
So this is one that we actually step back from pretty early on. Not the mirror, because I can't track that. Right.
Yeah.
But I also can't, people can lie to me that they're not weighing themselves and they are. But the recommendation is, hey, you've come here because we want to step back from these behaviors. You and I both know that the scale is going to dictate your day, which is ultimately going to affect what I'm trying to do with you. So if we can just take away one thing that will at least start the day on an even kill or like a baseline place, are you willing to take away that one thing for now? I mean, hopefully forever. And normally, I've never had actually someone say no. They could be doing it behind my back. I've had a lot of people lie to my face because these body dysmorphia and eating disorders
controlling them.
Yeah, exactly. They've said, yes, I can do that. And then we'll get someone who they trust to take that scale away.
So this is a couple of options here for what I do with clients. Is one, we just say, okay, let's just not do it. But like going back to number 1 is kind of easing into it. So like, for example, sometimes I have clients that will weigh themselves like intermittently, right? And then they're like, oh, I gained 2 pounds. Oh, I gained 3 pounds. Oh, but I lost weight the other week. And it's like, what?
Right.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, if you're going to weigh yourself, I support that, but you have to do it every day.
Right.
You can't just do it here and there. And I want you to weigh yourself every day if we have an okay relationship with it, right? And I am not against being like, this is not going well, we're done weighing. But I'll say, weigh yourself every day, because I want you to notice the fluctuations.
Right.
Like, just because you weighed 150 today and you weigh 152 tomorrow, you had to eat over 7,000 calories on top of maintenance. Like, that's an educational piece that I think a lot of people miss. And I think when I was in this disordered spectrum, I didn't know that. Right. Because you're told like, oh, I just gained weight. Like, they're not told how you gain weight. And it's just like
education.
Yeah. And so I think there is a value to keeping the scale for some people, so they can see, 1, if we have a hormonal cycle, how that changes it. 2, if we have more carbs at night or a drinking day or something like that, how that changes it. And then them being able to walk through with a help of a coach of why the scale is up or why the scale is down. And also to recognize that at some point it can't keep going down. Right. So what are we telling ourselves? Because you've been getting validation off hoping it goes down, hoping it goes down. So at some point, if it keeps going down, you don't weigh anything, so you don't exist.
Right. Well, and that transition can be so hard for people is when they step on a scale and they're trying to reverse or maintenance or whatever, and they've just put so much emphasis on it. Then we're just like, no, we're not going to do this anymore. Yeah. So you're right. There are certain people out there that we can actually educate them with doing this. And understanding the fluctuations. And once they do that, then it's easy to say, okay, see, this thing means nothing. So can we get rid of it now?
Well, and also for women out there who are breastfeeding, it will literally change based on how much milk you have in your boobs.
Right.
Like,
Or well, I ate Chinese food on Saturday night, and I weighed in 3 pounds heavier than I did this morning. And I was like, that's hilarious. And I had Chinese food because we got different little things. And it, portions are insane. We literally threw away half of each.
Really?
And we both ate. And then I had some for lunch.
Yeah.
Like, it was nuts. So, anyway, that happened overnight. So yes, so you can cold turkey it. We can use it as education so you understand how your body fluctuates. So you change the relationship with the scale, which ultimately will help you step away from it. The other thing too, I like to do with some clients, again, this is all based on like where we are on the spectrum of extreme, is predict their weight. I'm like, okay, let's look at what happened. Were you in your cycle? Have you pooped? How was your sleep last night? What did we eat yesterday? Is it going to be up or down? And they're like, up. And then they step on it. They're like, well, I predicted it would be up based on this and this. It was up. Great. Boom.
Yeah.
Now you have control.
Yeah.
Over this scale. And you're like, oh, I was right. Okay, move on. And then the next, it doesn't work out 100% because sometimes they're like, everything was fine yesterday. I slept well. And maybe it's up a little bit, but not as much as they think. The other thing I love with this is if they do end up binging and they're so afraid of it, so they like avoid it. I'm like, they're like, oh, well, it's not as bad as I thought it would be, which could be good and bad. But there's a lot of things we can do with the scale. And we very much want our clients to be focusing on beyond the scale. The scale is so stupid. Their energy levels, their strength in the gym, their libido, their clarity.
I'd say quality of sleep too.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you're always trying to be lean and you're always hungry, like you don't sleep very well.
Can I just say for women too, and I don't know if you experienced this, maybe it's just me. When I was at my leanest, I had a really hard time with like urgency and like having to go to the bathroom.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. It might have just been a me thing, like a pelvic floor. I don't know. But I just remember that being really bad. Yeah. It was crazy.
Maybe because of stress.
Could be.
Yeah.
Well, I also had a hysterectomy. So.
And that too.
Okay. Number 4. Yes. Turn off social media and change your algorithm. This is funny. So 2 weeks ago, I was watching these like TikToks on like body cam footage and like Karen's getting arrested. It's hilarious. And I'm just sitting there like, this is hilarious.
Did you ever watch Cheaters?
No.
Okay. Go ahead.
You know me. I love a good true crime. And then yesterday, I don't know how it ended up on my feed, but it was these military tap outs. Do you know what this is? So after you leave basic training, you go, your family is there, they're at graduation, and then you just stand at attention until someone in your family has to tap you out. And so they can like stand in front of you and be like, I am so proud of you. I love you so much. Da, 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 da. But you can't move. So you have to sit there, and these people are like have these tears falling down their eyes until someone goes boop. And then like some of them, they're like little newborn babies. Oh my God. I was like, this is the best thing ever. And so then I started watching like military homecoming.
Oh God, cry.
Listen, watch that shit instead of, how did I lose, 45 pounds?
Yeah, what did I eat in a day?
Or, blah, blah, blah. Or the girl who was, I've eaten this same breakfast for 3 years. What?
I know.
And another girl, she was like, I don't care what anyone says. When I'm this skinny, all of my clothes fit well.
What's interesting about this is lately on my feed, like it comes up on like the recommended, because I don't scroll through like the searchy one where it's just like whatever is
like
posted.
The Explorer page.
Yes, I don't do that. But so on if I don't hit follower, like my little system that I have where I only see who I want to see.
We'll tell people what that is.
Okay, so I don't use TikTok, so I have no idea. But on Instagram, if you hit the follow at the top left, it'll say followers or following. And if you hit that, it'll only show you who you're following. And
which minimizes the spam.
Yes.
Then
like the ads and all that. Also, you can mute people, so you don't necessarily have to unfollow, because I've done that before where I was like looking like other trainers, because I was starting to make me feel insecure about my abilities as a trainer. And I was like, this is not helpful. Like, this girl's getting it. That's awesome. Like, good for her. But I don't need to keep seeing it because it's making me insecure about what my offering is or my social media.
Right.
And so I learned that. But one time I didn't do that. And there is this girl, and she's like, of course, in her body posing. And she's like, I ate 1,200 calories and this is what happened.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, what? Like she did not eat 1,200 calories. Catch, of course. And it's like all the negative stuff and how now she has like repaired her body. And I'm like, but you're still using your body as
Clickbait.
Mhm. Okay.
Right.
So
it's hilarious. I shouldn't say it's hilarious. It's very sad.
It's very well, but the more you click on that, the more it's going to feed you. So that's what, like, your example is great. That's what's going to feed you now. And also taking away, like, you don't have to unfollow somebody if you don't want to, but mute them. Like, take that off your page because, so for example, there was a time in my life where I followed a lot of CrossFit girls, and it made me like just want to do it more and more and more and harder and better. But that wasn't helpful,
right?
Because it made me feel less than. And in the reality, these were like professional women, right? You know, I was going to grad school.
So like I wasn't following Michael Jordan. Yeah. And like, I'm going to do the basketball.
And one.
Yeah.
God. So it's the same mentality though, you know, and you don't recognize it's there. You just think, oh, I'm using that for inspiration. And then I'd see their workout. And so then my workout morning, like in the morning, my head became so consumed of like, what did she do? What did she do? What did she do? And then trying to combine it to make it, or I would do all three of them. That way I would follow, you know? And it once you recognize like this isn't helpful, same thing with us picking apart in the mirror, this isn't helpful. You can unfollow it passively without, like, you don't have to make a statement.
Right.
And I think so many people do that in hopes of like support or just like validation or something. It's like, just realize it's not helpful and take it off. You can always go, it's like the ex-boyfriend that you don't follow anymore. You can always search him. Right. He's there.
Right.
But it takes you that intention. That would be good for your deja vu. Yeah. It takes you in that intention of like, why am I searching for this guy? Like, ew.
Right.
And it brings kind of that barrier.
Right. Why am I doing this? You know, it's something I want to add to that. I agree with what you're saying. Two things. Number one, be careful, you guys, because you may be following someone who says that they're recovered from this.
Oh, yeah, they're not.
And just to play off what you said, but when you see them kind of standing where it's like perfect lighting, the flexed muscle, the abs, I'm thinking of one person.
I have somebody, I need to send it to you. It drives me nuts.
And she's like, I wish I could tell this girl, and it's pictures of her when she was younger, that she's going to, you know, heal her relationship with her body, and she's da-da-da-da.
And you're standing there with your body.
Yes. Yeah. And a very chiseled, perfect body. And I'm like, no. Message, great. Image, no. Like, why do you have to share that? Yes.
It's very conflicting because you're telling people that you're healed and you respect yourself, but yet here's my evidence of that. When I'm telling you, I don't need that evidence.
Well, and how her body looks, if as an average woman, you know that's not attainable unless you go to extremes or you're even taking drugs to get there. So really be careful too with this like body positivity, like who you're actually following, because yes, in my posts, I have pictures of my previous body and like myself in a bathing suit, but usually the ones of myself now, like I don't have, you know, these abs popping out and this and that, but I got space buns in my hair and I'm loving my life and I look good. Like, I'm not saying I look bad. Right. So yes, on my page, you might see some skin, but majority of the time it's like a floating head.
Yeah.
You know, and then we're talking about it. So just be careful with that too. Okay. Last one, start back up with a very different goal. Now, I mean, I think changing this is the goal.
Yes.
That should be the goal.
Because when I heard that one too, again, a safe rebuttal for a person who was in that mindset, I would have thought, okay, well, I'll just change the goal to like, instead of like powerlifting to bodybuilding, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And where there's still some aesthetic or like CrossFit to this, like
you're
still
so
an extreme.
And I'm so Adam and Justin.
Yes. There's a lot of extreme that I would have done. So it's not necessarily like, okay, the goal, I'm going to do less. It would have been like, I'm just going to change my modality to this. And I did experience that, right? Like when I got hurt and injured. So most of my stuff was CrossFit, but then once I was starting to feel better, it became like volume of like, how much can I do? Not necessarily CrossFit, because I couldn't like box jump anymore. I couldn't do the running, like rowing. I was working on breathing, so I didn't want to do that. So then it became like typical, like, you know, lifting sets, but how much, how heavy, how long? Like I still was getting my little jolt of energy from that.
Right.
Instead of realizing like it's still not healthy.
Right.
It's still not working for you.
Yeah, no. And that's a good example, because people will do that. And that goes right back to that influencer of like, I think I'm doing the inner work, but
I'm not,
you know, my focus is on the inner work, but I'm not changing kind of my identity around it. So for me, the work is the inner work, right? That should be the goal. Then once the inner work has been done, well, you can do it side by side, because we do this with clients. We do the inner work, and then we start to, as they start to become aware of themselves, we start to show them how their behaviors can change to help kind of mimic this new awareness. And those changes are slowly made over time, right? So with what the guys are saying is, as we're doing, and this is what we do in our program, as we're doing the inner work, we're creating behavioral change that then changes the goal.
Yeah.
Right. But really for me, it has to be, I have to do this work, this inner work, because I wish I had the statistics on people well, I do, because they're literally only in our program who've done it this way.
Yeah.
You know, there's not a program like ours out there. I don't know. And there's people who teach mindset coaching. There's people who research, you know, psychology and how it affects this.
Yeah.
There's people who coach, you know, and maybe have certifications in mindset, and coach like on fitness and exercise, but there's not this cohesive, psychologically evidence-based backed program like the mindset method, plus the coaching, certifications, nutrition, personal training, etc. So, you know, obviously we have data on how effective this is, that, you know, 99.99999% of people out there don't. So they're going to tend to turn towards, you know, some of these other people to fix this.
Yeah. You know, I was just
working.
thinking when you say that, like, I think those certifications are great because they do bring other aspects to the table for other coaches. They give them the opportunity to offer more in their coaching, like program and packaging. My concern with that is, and if you're listening to this and you're a trainer, it's a certification. There's no, like we talked about with Michelle, there's kind of no body of like that is overseeing. And I think with the wellness coaches, sometimes they focus on, well, just, you know, really try and have an apple today.
Right.
You know, and it's like, but the apple's not the problem, right? Like having Jane to eat the apple, like has nothing to do with her lifestyle, and backing off and understanding that, you know, not eating is not helping and is causing this, and, you know, and I don't know. I would hope that they offer kind of that in-depth stuff, but because we get clients that were usually not their first stop,
right?
I just don't feel that that's there. I don't, and I know there are clients out there who have gotten that, and there are coaches out there who do offer that, but they're not coming to us because they've done it.
Right.
Whereas I find, because they've touched on it, and even you talked about this before, they touched on it a little bit with therapy, they touched on it a little bit with the dietitian before, or maybe they had a nutrition coach before, and then they had a personal trainer at some point, but it never all came together. They never all understood how these things really intertwine, and like family systems play a role, and your environment plays a role, and the way you set up your lifestyle and your behaviors and the social aspects that you all have, that all plays a role.
Right.
It's all been segmented and or has been unregulated to the advantage and disadvantage of the consumer.
Right. No, absolutely. So when we're looking at doing the inner work, right, or the work we haven't done before, you know, it really does need to be that cohesive team. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean people have to work with us, but what I want people to understand is when we change this goal, and if you're listening to us, you're like, yes, I do need to do this work. This is the piece I haven't done. Then what we want to do is have your trainer, your nutrition coach, your therapist, all, like I said, sign those releases of information. Let's see. I mean, I would even ask your trainer, like, are you willing to do this? Because this is really important to me. I'm really trying to change my relationship with my body, food, exercise, and doing it in the right way. I need all of the people in my team to be communicating in an effort to help me. Now,
That's hard because
take a lot of courage.
Well, so that's one thing that I really pride myself on for my clients is being kind of the spearhead of their health. I don't want to say like take their authority away, but one of the things I like to do is say, oh, you're working with this person. I will get their ROI, their release of information. I will talk to them.
Mhm.
Okay. Oh, I want you to go see this person. I will talk to them, blah, blah, blah. Like I really take it as part of my job is to be the central intelligence for them.
Yes.
And then because sometimes clients are not great communicators of what's happening between people, whether that's because there's so many other things going on in their life or they don't really understand what that person's saying, but they don't want to tell them.
Well, oftentimes too in a session, like you'll hear one or two things that stick with you.
Yes.
You know, and like the other 50 minutes, you're like, I don't know what we talked about.
So if you are listening to this and you're like, man, I do have a therapist, I do have a nutrition coach, and I do have a trainer, I would ask you, who is going to be your kind of like medical power of attorney,
right?
You know, like
your case manager.
Who's going to be your case manager? Is it you? And do you have the bandwidth to do that?
Mm-hmm.
And if not, are one of those people willing to? Mm-hmm. And if not, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
because it's very hard to have people talking. It's like the government, you know, everybody's talking separately. There's nothing's really going on.
You just text them and then add the add the fucking guy from what is it?
A reporter.
Yeah.
They'll let you know.
Yep. So everything that Mind Pump had mentioned again, brings so much knowledge and education, and you know, just turning your mind towards that there can be another way is exactly why we love those guys. And you know, this is really about just taking it to that next level for maybe for that person who's a bit more extreme, and saying, look, yes, we can get to the points that were made. Some of them we can do right away. Some of them need a little bit more coddling around or preparation for, so that this process seems, well, it's going to be challenging. You cannot change without getting uncomfortable. That is life. But if we can minimize that stress, because again, as we talked about in past episodes, like there is an anti-reward system. When the system becomes too overwhelmed with the change, it will lose motivation for change. That's how our brains work. So what we're kind of doing is putting these like bumpers in place before we're making the big change, in an effort for that big change to not seem as big, in an effort to get to the goal sooner. Because if I'm overwhelming the system with this change of just white knuckling through that week, I'm going to lose motivation to do that. And now I, go work out, and now I'm starting right back from where I was. And I do that over and over and over and over and over again. And I'm now decades into trying to have changed this thing when I could have just let the air out of the balloon slowly.
That's what I'd like to tell my clients is, you like to do the challenging thing. Obviously, you're working out, twice a day, every day, whatever spectrum that is. You're very dialed in on nutrition. That takes a lot of work and consistency and effort. You like to be challenged. Let's do the harder thing. Yeah. And then you can see I can let go a little bit of this. It's not going to happen overnight, like we're saying, but it's going to change your life.
Oh, yeah.
And it's going to be easier each time. And so, for example, one thing that I would tell myself when I was going through it is I didn't die. And that's very extreme, but that's literally was if I don't do this, and then what, and then what, and then what? But I just kept telling myself, okay, the worst thing that could have happened is I would die. And I didn't. Okay.
I want to say something about that. Is there's truth in that, because what you're thinking about is going to die is your identity and self-worth. Unless you're doing crazy extreme things, but there really is some truth to that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm still who I am.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't work out today.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try it again tomorrow and see if I'm still who I am without this thing. Because the way we look has become who we are. Look at all these reality shows, these young girls. I'm so saddened for how much work they've put into their face.
Oh my God.
And their bodies at 22, 25. It's come on, honey. There's this hope that, maybe I'll get rich off of this early and I don't have to keep this up. This is off topic, but if you guys listen to us, we do this. It's not off topic, but there was that teen bride who got married to this actor at age 16. And at age 16, she had full-blown lips, blonde hair. Her boobs were real, but she would wear like cutlets to like push them up. Then she ended up getting them done. By the time she was 22, she looked
42, 52. Well,
50.
you're 42. So,
well, I don't look 42.
I know. That's why I was like, wait a second. We can't use that one because you're 42
Right.
and you don't look 42.
And so, that's just, I feel so sad for this generation of all of this work and stuff. But coming back to the topic, at the end of the day, yes, we can try to do this ourselves. And I hope that for a lot of listeners, take our advice, put it together in a way that works best for you. If you feel like you can hold yourself accountable to doing this and I want to say it's not just holding yourself accountable, but being compassionate when things slip up, because that's a part of the process.
Oh, yeah.
Being aware, being accountable, being compassionate, getting curious, all the things we talk about. If you cannot, and it's becoming this barrier, what we need to figure out what that barrier is. And coaching obviously is very helpful for that. Doing, as we talked about, with the team, if you don't want to work with us directly, which we have everything you need to get to that new place. And our mindset method is a psychological curriculum that I created over my 15 years experience as a therapist and personal trainer, right? So not only my clinical work, but also the work that I've done in coaching, as well as our ability to then use that to create a new lifestyle. But if you can't do it on your own, it's okay. It's okay to ask for help. I've gone to therapy for this. You've gone to therapy for this.
No, I never went to therapy.
Oh, really?
Swear. Because this is why it's important who you talk to. Here's what happened to me. The therapist I was seeing at the time, I kind of brought it up. And I mean, and I put that kind of blame on me, but I shouldn't. But it was kind of one of those things of like, yeah, I think I like kind of do this. And she's like, oh, girl, you're fine.
Yeah. I wish I could do that.
Yeah. And she shut it down.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh, okay. Like she said, I'm okay. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's why it's important to who you talk to. Like I did a lot of this myself and then kind of sped up with working through you. But it was hard. It would have been really nice to have somebody that knew I wasn't crazy.
Oh,
because I felt crazy. I felt out of control, which made me be more controlled with myself and my body, and just anxious and upset and a lot of negative emotions because I didn't feel like anybody really understood. And I think because I kept it to myself, whether other people saw it, obviously people did, it took me longer than it needed to.
Right.
But that's also what makes me who I am today and the coach I am today.
You are today.
And it's one thing I do envy about our clients of like, guys, you like get this not solved, but like you get such a better platform within 4 months, and within a year, like you just are in such a better life. Where for me, it took many years. And even to this day, there's still some stuff.
Oh yeah. And that's a part of the process too. So awesome. Well, again, we want to thank Mind Pump for all of their support for this podcast. I mean, they have been so wonderful to us. We enjoy all of their information, and I'm glad we can it's not necessarily collaborate.
Yeah.
Like it's not a collaboration, but just say, we love what you said. And with what we do, which is more specific, these are the additional recommendations that we'd add to that. So, I won't call it banter because I
like banter.
So we thank them. We hope that they find this information helpful as well as you. And like I said, just take from each what works best for you and put that into practice, and just try to be consistent with it and see if, we can start at least at a minimum respecting our bodies, because that's really where we want our clients to be. So thank you guys for following. If you found this information helpful, please share it, whether that's on social media or with a friend. If you loved this episode, we'd love a 5-star rating and review. And you can check out the show notes for all of the places you can find us. Do we have anything coming up? I don't think we do.
No, because you already started your
spring
clean, or what is it? Spring master.
It's a resilient role.
I don't know why I call it spring cleaning.
Okay. Yeah. That was a master class.
Okay. That's what it is. That's because I was looking at YouTube last night. That's why.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess we just have one thing left to say.
What you say in the mind,
you see in the mirror. Bye.